Let's speak to George Galloway, the Respect MP who represents Bradford West. Good evening to you, George.
Good evening.
Yeah, what's your reaction?
Well, it's not often I agree with my fellow Bradford MP, Philip Davis, the Conservative, but he's absolutely correct. And it turns out both of us have written to the DPP demanding the same thing. If someone fiddled the Department of Social Security out of thousands of pounds, faking invoices, sending them to themselves and making the taxpayer pay, they would undoubtedly be prosecuted and almost certainly imprisoned. It's simply outrageous that a Member of Parliament can do that and walk away with his pension and a bit of opprobrium, which he'll no doubt live off sitting on a beach somewhere.
So just to clarify, Mr Galloway, you have actually written to the Director of Public Prosecutions yourself? Yes,
and how funny that it's a Bradford double act, as Mr Davis and I don't agree on practically anything else in the world.
Stay there, George, if you would. I want to bring in Rob Halfon, who is the Conservative MP for Harlow, who got to know Dennis McShane in Parliament. Rob, good evening to you.
Good evening.
You got to know Dennis McShane quite well, didn't you? Just tell us how that came about.
Well, first of all, I should say that I think he's right to resign, and I think it's very important that MPs are treated equally before the law if they do wrong, just as the members of the public are treated equally before the law if they do something wrong. However, I think it's also important to remember the good as well as the bad. And although I'm of a different politics to Mr McShane, and I'm not a friend of his, I watched him in Parliament. He was an incredibly hard-working parliamentarian, and also he was a great defender of freedom. He fought against anti-Semitism, he fought against extremism, and he was a dedicated and passionate man. And whilst I can, like everybody else, I'm upset about what he did, I have praise for some of his work as a parliamentarian, and I think it's important that we recognise the good people do as well as the bad.
Do you have some sympathy for him tonight?
I have sympathy for anyone who has done wrong. That doesn't mean I agree with what they've done, and I accept that they must face the punishments that are meted out to them, and he has resigned tonight, and that is the right thing. But nevertheless, we are very quick to dance on people's graves. We've sort of become a society where we're like those old ladies around the French guillotine during the Revolution, knitting and laughing at people as they get beheaded. And I think we want to move away from that, because my view is society, we're facing a number of convulsions. There are MPs have come under fire, bankers have come under fire, footballers have come under fire, journalists have come under fire, and I think that we need to restore some balance, not to make sure that if people do wrongdoing that is corrected, but also focus on the good that people do as well.
What about the suggestion from George Galloway, then, that Dennis McShane should now be prosecuted?
Well, I think that is a matter for the police and the matter for the authorities to decide whether he's done wrong, and if he has done wrong, then the courts will prosecute.
With respect, Rob, he clearly has done wrong. He's been suspended from the House of Commons for a year, decided to give up his seat because he's fiddled more than £7,000. That's the finding.
Exactly, and that is wrong. Now, whether or not that he has committed a criminal offence against the law is for the prosecution authorities to decide, and if they do decide that he has done that, then of course he should be prosecuted in the way that other people who are prosecuted for doing wrong. But all I'm saying is I'm not condoning what he's done in any shape or form. It is wrong.
I understand that, and you've highlighted much of the good work that you say Mr McShane has done, but members of your own party, when there was rioting on the streets of England last year, called for the rioters to be imprisoned, to be treated without any leniency, and in many cases that's exactly what happened. People were jailed for stealing pairs of trainers. If an MP fiddles expenses, shouldn't he be treated in exactly the same way as those looters?
There's no disagreement between us. If an MP has done wrong, and if Mr McShane has broken the criminal law, he should be prosecuted. Absolutely. I'm not saying that for one moment. All I'm saying is that I'm just trying to restore some balance in that, unfortunately, in politics, you're only remembered for the last thing you've done rather than the many good things you might have done. And I think that as a society as well, we don't just need to dance on people's graves. We need to have some balance and say, yes, OK, that guy did wrong, it's unacceptable, but we do know and we should recognise that he did some good things in his life.
Is there a point there, George Galloway, that we need to reflect on the good work that Dennis McShane has done in Parliament?
Wow, a Tory who feels sorry for anyone who's done anything wrong. That's a first. There's people in jail now, as you put it, for stealing pairs of trainers, and the Tories were crying out for condign punishment. This barrel of soft soap that your other guest has just poured over the miscreant McShane is simply unbelievable, and the public listening to it will be astounded. This man stole thousands of pounds from the public, from the taxpayer, writing fake invoices and claiming public money on the basis of them. And you've got a Conservative on air asking us to feel sorry for him. He should be 12 months in prison, not 12 months banned from the House of Commons.
Well, George, in fairness...
One last point. Can I make one last point?
Yeah.
Worked hard. He worked hard for Israel, that's for sure. Maybe that's the reason that the soft soap's being poured on him. He worked hard to talk us into the war in Iraq, in which 1 million people died. Feel sorry for him. I won't feel sorry for him, even if the cell door clangs shut behind him.
George, Rob was simply saying that he doesn't condone any criminal activity if indeed that is what's happened.
That, Adrian, but he was still condoning it. And everyone listening to this knows it. A soft soap deluge is what we just listened to for 5 minutes there.
Rob, I think you deserve the right to reply to that. A soft soap deluge.
I'm grateful for the right reply, because I think just George Galloway just sums up everything that I'm trying to talk about. You can condone what is wrong, but you can have a sense of fairness. And George Galloway speaks.
George, let him finish, please.
George Galloway, every time he opens his mouth, I think people make a judgment on what kind of person and human being he is. I believe one should have a sense of humanity in these issues as well.
Well, your voters will be making a judgment on you, my friend. Let me assure you of that. And if they're not already, I'll make sure that they do. Don't you talk to me about the hard work of Dennis McShane. Dennis McShane was a warmongering bigot who hated...
Well, George, whatever you think of Dennis McShane, he can hold his views in Parliament, and in a robust parliamentary democracy, people are entitled to hold their view. What we're talking about this evening
There's 1 million people
are the expenses. Well, that may well be a discussion for another day, George. We're talking about the expenses tonight, and Rob Halfon is trying to talk about the good work that he believes that Dennis McShane...
Adrian, the man just stole thousands of pounds from the taxpayer, and you want to talk about the good that he's done. The man is a thief, and he's brought Parliament even lower into disrepute than it already was. I just can't believe the terms of reference of this discussion. And I'll tell you something else. If it was me that had stolen thousands of pounds from the taxpayer, you wouldn't be talking about it in these terms.
How about that, Rob?
Well, as I say, I think George Galloway should speak for himself. I'm not condoning
yes, you are.
Moment.
Yes, you are.
George, let him speak, please.
That's classic George Galloway. Just doesn't want to let anyone speak and interrupts in everything, because he always tries to shut people down.
Your voters are listening. Your voters are listening.
And I'm proud of what I'm saying, and I'm glad they're listening, and I hope very many of them are, because I believe it was unacceptable what Dennis McShane did. It was wrong what he did, but the law will decide whether he will face criminal prosecution or not. But at the same time, I believe that it is the decent human thing to recognise that this MP did work hard in Parliament, and he did some good things as well as bad. That is all I'm saying. I think that's a perfectly reasonable argument to make. He's not my party. There's many things he said I disagreed with, but I just think that we need to have balance in these matters.
Rob Halfon and George Galloway, thank you both.